Greetings, friends. I am Tana of the Ancient Bears. Most of you have seen me in your villages at one time or another as I pass through telling stories and answering questions from your elders about histories and what's going on in other areas. I'd like to thank the Onondaga people, the keepers of the flame of the Haudenosaunee Great Law, the old elder brothers and the other elder brothers of the Haudenosaunee, the Mohawk and the Seneca people, and the younger brothers of the Haudenosaunee people, the Oneida and the Cayuga, and to many of the Grand Council clan representatives who are joining us here today from the Great Law of Peace. I also noticed people from the Ojibwe, the people on the western end of the Great Sweetwater Lakes, primarily the one known as Ichigumi, people from the Washagi, from the great flowing river that goes from Ichigumi down to the southern Bitterwater. And I also see people from the Sewanee, the people of the beautiful flowing river, some people call the Ohio. And I'd like to thank you all for being here and joining us. I notice there are other representatives of clans from people in other villages. I'd like to make a special thanks to the hand talkers. Special thanks, hand talkers. So I don't need to be concentrating on what I'm saying with my hands as I'm trying to express what I'm saying in words. So I truly appreciate the work that the hand talkers are doing. And then finally, a special thanks to the Bear Clan of the Onondaga people of the Haudenosaunee for allowing me to use this space and for helping take care of me while I'm here. About 6 winters ago, the Haudenosaunee Council called me to join them to ask me 3 specific questions. The first question related to how should they address the God of Gods issue with the black shirts and their people. The La Francais, who have been trading with us for a while and who gifted me this interesting headpiece, have brought with them recently the black shirts they call Jesuits, who are professing a single God that is the only true God, and professing that unless we join them in worshiping this God, that their God will destroy us. Which brings us to the second question the council asked of me. Are the black shirts Wendigo? Now, as all of you know, Wendigo is the people eater, the great destroyer of people. And for many generations now, we have all seen many of our family, many of our clans, many of our village people are dying for reasons we have no idea. And in many cases, I have run across whole villages that were gone totally. In other places, I have seen villages where clans have joined together. Our clans from other villages have joined with the clans in their villages because there weren't enough people to progressively do everything they need, put all the effort in they need as a village to survive. So they asked the question, are these black shirts who are threatening destruction if we don't agree with their God actually just Wendigo? And then the third question, are the outsiders, not just the La Francais that we've been seeing trading here, but also the Anglais who have been in the east, the great eastern Bitterwater, and the Hispaniola who have been down for many years now in the central part by the great Bitterwaters to the south, and have caused much trouble down there and have in fact come up here many times. Are these outlaws? Are they outsiders? Should we accept them as outsiders, or should we war against them as outlaws? So these are the 3 questions the Haudenosaunee Council asked me to bring to the Ancient Bear Clan and to find out what the clan finds in their knowledge and their ability to travel into the history to decide how we're going to treat with these outsiders. I called the Black Bear Clan meeting, or the Ancient Bear Clan meeting, and told the other members that we would have it in the land of the Anyi and the Muskogee, which is almost to the very south where the Mississippi Great running water enters into the northern portion of the bitter southern sea. The 9 members of our group, of our clan, were able to finally gather about a year later at that location, and we began discussing what we needed to do to provide the answers for the Haudenosaunee. Now, the 9 Ancient Bear Clan members relate to each of the 9 sectors of this world as we have known it. As you know, I, Tanya, cover the great flowing waters, the Mississippi, from the land of Tathonka to the Ohio River, where it joins the mountains to the east, and down all the way to the Great Bitter Water to the south. Nape, another ancient bear, covers the west bitter waters, and it's important for me to note to you that Nape classifies himself as male. I'm ambiguous about it because I have no desire one way or the other. The Winne covers the eastern bitter water area from the north to the Great Bitter Waters on the south. She, on the other hand, is classifying herself as a woman. Angok is, in fact, the bear, the ancient bear from the very far north, to the north where they have the northern bitter waters. And they live in the land of the snow and the tundra. So Angok, who's also ambiguous about their sex, joined us. Karib is the middle bitter waters male, who represents the people of the islands in the middle bitter waters. Ame is the Great Southern River ancient bear member, the river many call the Amazon. And Omi covers the land portion to the west of the Great Southern Bitter Waters. Omi is a male. Then Pore covers the west bitter waters on the southern continent with the southern sky, and Tine covers the eastern bitter waters of the southern sky. Pure is a female, Tine is ambiguous. So when we gathered, we had 3 males, 3 females, and 3 who are ambiguous about their sexuality. This is important because as we planned our council, the first thing we have to do in the council is select a white sashim and a red sashim. Now, the white sashim is the one who controls the discussions of the council meeting. The red sashim is the one that controls who the white sashim says can speak, is the speaker, and make sure that nobody speaks out of turn. They also are the one that is generally responsible for carrying out whatever actions we have to have or we decide to have as a council. The group of 9 discussed who they felt should be the white sashim, and as I was the one that brought the questions from the Haudenosaunee, everyone agreed that I should serve as the white sashim, which takes away my vote. I don't vote on the results. I have a right to comment on them, but I don't actually have a vote. Winne of the East was also asked to join us, as Winne has been involved with the Anglais. And between their involvement with the Anglais and my involvement with the Le Français, we felt we would have a better chance of gathering information that's relevant to those people that are asking for the questions, which are the Haudenosaunee. When we gathered, they then had to decide who were going to be the three elements of the council. One of the elements is the men, and we had Nape, we had Carib, and we had Ome. So we had the three men we needed for the men's portion of the council. They act as the big brothers. The three women of the council, we have the Ame and we have Pure, but since Winne is being the Red Sashim, Winne could not serve as the women of the council. And so one of the ambiguous members decided that they would go ahead and serve as a woman for the council. Tine of the Eastern Bitter Waters in the South agreed to that role. Now that only left one person who was not involved in the discussion, and that was Tine. Pure was the third woman. Tine would have been serving as the cherished grandmother. So the council had the three men acting as the elder brothers, the three women acting as the younger sisters, and then the cherished grandmother, who basically is a mediator. As the two groups reach discontent or disagreement, they are expected to work together to come to a conclusion. In the end, the council, as in all your village councils, have to have a unanimous agreement to whatever results are coming out. Where the two groups get together and have problems, the cherished grandmother is the one expected to come in and help find ways to mediate and to bring them to agreement. So our council began, and the first thing we had to do was decide what the questions were, which I explained to them were, again, what do we do about the gods? Are the black shirts Wendigo? And do we treat these new people as outsiders or as outlaws? Which is critical, because if we decide to treat them as outlaws, that means we begin war with them. We discussed it as a council regarding what we all knew, and since we've all been around for generations, we had a lot of history that we could talk about, and there were several items that had brought the ancient Bear Clan together before that we could use as a basis for it. What we did in those cases was we assigned two people to go on a vision quest. And in the vision quest, their spirits would be able to travel both through time and space and see what was going on in other areas outside of our world, and be able to help us understand better how they had come to be who they were, so we could find out more about the origins of Les Français and of Anglais and of the Hispaniola, so that we could know how we might better deal with them. One of the first quests that we had was the Summer Water People quest. We had a people living off the northern eastern coast of the eastern bitter water, who were actually only living on the coast for the winter time, which was very odd. Most of the people found the winter in the north as being very bad, and they would travel south. But these people in the spring would take their boats, which they called umiaks, a skin boat that was over whalebone, and then big enough, in fact, to handle as many as 70 people, a full clan. They had sails that would allow the wind to move them, and they also had paddles, and they also had anywhere from 4 to 6 kayaks, which were smaller skin boats that could be used to pull the umiak. These people in the spring would watch for these floating islands of ice coming down from the north, and when they saw one that was suitable, one or more clans would sail out and board that floating island, that floating piece of ice. They could carve it up to where they had a place to lay their umiaks, turn them over and use them as their home for the spring and summer. They could tie their kayaks up off the water and then put them in when they need it. And they would follow the currents, which would take their island of ice and float it back toward the eastern sunrise. And then some 6 to 9 months later, they would come back on another floating piece of ice that came down from that area and brought them right back to the same place. And then they'd spend the winter on the coast at the bitter eastern water. Now the question that we had in those days was, were they us or were they outsiders? And two people, Wine and Angak, who were both involved, one with the eastern bitter waters, the other one with the northern area where these people were going to and from. And so they followed the water people and spent time with them, both spiritually as a spirit quest, and then ultimately actually took a voyage with them and found out where they were going and how they lived. And it turned out they were basically hunter-gatherers who were using the Great Eastern Bitter Water as their hunting grounds. In the wintertime, when the storms got too bad that it would sink their umiaks and their ice islands were not as available, they would come back into the land and they would stay there in a place where all the people who had normally lived there moved south. And the new people would stay there for the winter and then head back out in the next spring. After discussions with everybody, it was decided they were part of us. They were part of our family, and it was fascinating to learn more about how they lived, which was so different than the rest of us. Now, the second vision quest was, in fact, the vision quest to greet the outsiders who would come once again from the eastern lands, across the eastern bitter waters, but via the northern bitter waters. And then they took flowing waters from the northern bitter water up to the top of a hill that then had another flowing water that went down the other side into Gitchigumi, into the great Sweetwater Lake. They were going there to hunt for or find what we call the green melting stone, a type of stone that could actually change shape when you put it in fire, but really had no value to us because it was soft. The best we could do is pound it into bracelets and armbands and decorative elements. They were too soft to use for anything else. But these people from the east felt they were of great value, and they came in politely. They asked what they could and could not do. We treated them as guests, as outsiders, and many of our people would share their time in the lake gathering these green melting stones into what looked like an arm and then carrying that back to their boats at the northern Great Bitter Waters and replacing rocks in the bottom of their big wooden boats with these green stones until they had filled it as much as they could and then sailed back to their homes to the east. And this actually happened for generations. Not every summer not every spring and summer would they show up, but they showed up frequently, and they were always looking for these green melting stones, and we were always happy to oblige. A few times they showed us what they did to the green melting stones, which really amazed us because they did something that made it hard enough to use as a knife blade or as an axe. But when we asked them how they did that, the people said, we don't know. We just bring this green melting stone to them, and they do it to create these amazing new things. So once again, they always acted as outsiders, as friends. They sometimes left people to live with us, but not to the degree that we've seen with the La Francais more recently. One thing we did note, though, they became very interested when traders coming up from the mound builders and from the South Bitter Waters, brought with them the yellow stone that melt, and then the grayish-white stone that melts in fire. And they were excited about that, but the trip back down the Mississippi to the Great Bitter Waters to the south, and then over to the lands to the west, where these stones were found, was too much time. They didn't have the ability to either go that far or carry that much back with them up to the great northern lakes. And after a while, they stopped needing the stone, and we stopped seeing them. They left some interesting elements, though. The ones we found most interesting is when they took large stones, stones that were bigger than a man, and they would put them together to create what looked like a table, where they had two of them or three of them supporting one on the top that was flat. And we asked them why they did that, and they said, oh, they were just leaving a record of where they were so that if future people came, they could see those stones and know they were in the right place. Which made sense to us, and we didn't have the ability to move them anyway, so we left them where they were. Now, the third vision quest we were asked to do actually came from the south, from the people on the western end who were developing the Three Sisters crops at the time. They had people that they were finding on the other end. These people were on the western Great Bitter Waters, but the people they were running into were coming up the Great Southern River from the eastern Bitter Waters. Many of them had been shipwrecked, and they were just going with whoever would take them. And so they were starting to see these people, and it was concerning them. Then a large group of very dark-skinned people, as if we'd been out in the sun for years and turned dark-colored like a wood does in a fire. They came, and they had many boats, and they landed in the eastern Bitter Waters by the Great Southern River. But they did not last long. Some of them died from diseases, others died from other reasons that we could never figure out what they were. They were warlike, but they were fighting each other almost as much as they were fighting anybody they came across. So we went down there to discover that. Tana, I, and Angok did the people that came from the north. This Great Southern River was, the vision quest was by Ame and Tine. Now, the next one was the Middle Bitter Waters, and these were traders, and we suspected these were ancestors of the people, the more recent people from the ancestors that had been going up to the Great Greenstone that melted, finding a new way to get into the Great Middle Waters so that they could collect and trade for the white melting stone and the yellow melting stone. These people at first were very, very courteous, just as they had been in the north, but they started a settlement in the lands of the western central Bitter Waters, and intermarried with the people who were living there, and became a group of mixed race people, both the people from the eastern waters and the people from our lands. And everything went well for a while. Much of the yellow and white stones were shipped across the way, along with some other things that they found interesting, mostly plants that were involved in certain types of spirit quests. In any case, that went well, but then at one time, all of a sudden, a number of their people came over and they stayed, and they never went back again. And when we asked why they had not been traveling back, they said their lands had been taken from them, and there was no way they could go back, and so they were staying here. We considered this too, because once again, were these outsiders that were going to be accepting our ways, or were these going to be outlaws? And in truth, they didn't accept our ways. They brought in their own ideas. Already they had begun great stone structures, not unlike the stone that we'd seen moved in the north, but in these cases, they were making them into buildings and structures that were enormous and just amazing to us. They were able to read the sky in ways we could never imagine. And they developed a relationship that was not based on the clan village as all of us in the north are, or hunter-gatherers, which is the other groups in the north, but these were based on one or more males being considered royalty of some kind, superior to the others, and many of the people who were putting the effort in to support them were being treated as slaves, not being given enough. And we saw the first signs of what we called greed, where some couldn't accumulate enough and others, in fact, couldn't get enough. And we could not understand that foreign concept. And in fact, that led to the final vision quest that we had, which was of the mound builders, the people who would come up the great flowing water of the Mississippi from the south, from the great bitter water to the south, and then decided to put villages all along the tributaries in the main river of the Mississippi, all the way up actually until north of the joining of the Mississippi and the Ohio rivers. They had mounds they built, and we ultimately asked them about the mounds and had to laugh what the mounds were for. The mounds were for their royalty, because being in the river valleys, they were basically coming up there because the number of people in that central area in the south exceeded what they could grow and plant and provide as the food for all the people they had building these monuments, being the royalty, being their army or their military, which they were very warlike people as well. And so they were coming north and they were planting, and they introduced us to the Three Sisters crop. They were the first to teach us about maize and beans and squash and how to build them into mounds and put the maize seed in the middle, the plant in the middle, and as it grew, you attached the 4 bean plants to it, and they grew up, and then ultimately you plant the 4 squash plants at the bottom of this mound that's about a stride wide, and as the maize plant grew, the beans were lifted off the ground, and the insects couldn't get to them. And as the squash grew, they put out their broad leaves that covered the ground, and the weeds didn't grow. And the corn didn't produce that much. It wasn't that important, but it was very important for keeping the beans off the ground, because we could get lots of beans from every bean plant, and by just having a field of Three Sisters crops, we could feed a clan for a whole winter, up until the clans could be planted and start growing again and be harvested again. So these were a very valuable commodity, and we accepted that in return for them taking over these areas in the bitter water, or in the great flowing water, that we could accept them being there. The reason they built the mounds, though, is one of the things they were after were also Tatanka. Tatanka provided for them a great deal of food that could be, meat that could be dried north and then taken by raft down the great flowing river to the great bitter water and shipped across to the people in the western end of the great southern water, and provide food for all these people. And so they had villages all over the river, but once again, since the river is the area that the bison tend to travel in, when a large herd of bison would cross the Mississippi above the Missouri River, which is the river that heads from the Mississippi to the far west, they could get thousands of bison cross them, especially if there were a fire on the Great Plains, or if there were something else that might be chasing them. Certainly we would never chase them across the river, but we would always try and get some to cross the river, because they provided food for all of those of us who were living in the Ohio Valley and in the great Sweetwater lakes. So, but when the bison came through and the flatlands, if the royalty were living there, they would trample them to death. So the royalty had them build these huge mounds so they could live on top of the mounds. And when the bison did come through, which was rare, but it did happen several times in someone's lifetime, they could be safe, and any of those who could crowd up there would be safe, and the rest ran for the trees and climbed the trees until the bison moved on. And they had ways of helping the bison decide to move on, so that worked as well. So the mound builders, again, I did the vision quest, this time with Ome, to find out more about those. And so we had some experience with these people coming from the east and how to do a vision quest. The Ancient Bear Council decided then that I and I and Winne should in fact be the two that travel to the east to discover the history of these Les Français, Anglais, and Hispaniola, and try and find answers to the three questions asked by the Haudenosaunee. Preparations were made, the necessary elements were gathered, and it was anticipated that Winne and I would be gone for many, many months. And so the 9 were there to take care of that part of us which would stay behind while our spirits would cross over to the other side. We entered upon the spirit quest and followed a path that Winne had taken when she had been with the people who were floating across the eastern waters to the lands to the other side, on the sunrise side. And so we were able to come down in that area, not too far from where the Anglais and the Les Français were, and then a little bit further south we found that the Hispaniola were there. These were all people with boats that were coming back and forth from our lands. Now, the first thing that the two of us noticed was in the time that we were going over there, these people were constantly having these huge wars with battles like we would never have seen. There were times when we've had clan on clan and even village on village, and there have been times when there have been hardships where the great fires would kill off animals within a forest, and the people that had been living there would have to move elsewhere, and there was nowhere else to move other than where others were. And if they couldn't find enough to gather, they would end up having to fight for their new space. That was rare, but it did happen, and we were aware of it. These were amazing wars with men after men, typically, fighting more men, which with no seeming reason. They just seemed to be fighting all the time. So we knew that wasn't going to help us. We would not understand how or why they were fighting. We then ran into another ancient bear, one from that side, and this ancient bear was Prebus. Mm-hmm. So there we met Prebus, who was an ancient bear as we were, basically in the northern portion of that part of the world, and of the same abilities that we had. We were immediately recognizing each other as cousins. And Prebus and Winne and I talked to find out what was a good time to go to, and Prebus was actually quite helpful and actually said, yes, I know exactly where to take you. So we joined Prebus and went back, and we found another person who, although not an ancient bear, was someone of great worth, was in fact the Earth Mother, Gaia. And we were introduced by Prebus to Gaia, and Gaius was really a very nice person. We talked about what Gaia was, and both Prius and Gaia were able to explain to us that Gaia was the Earth Mother in persona, and her responsibility was to make sure that the animals, the weather, all things necessary for abundance and growth were in fact best. And she had the powers to help that. As a matter of fact, she was such a great goddess that she offered me what was a local emblem of her, which is much like a pregnant woman, which is actually Gaia is pretty much always pregnant. But she gave this to me in a way that I could bring it back, and I was very appreciative of her for doing that. Now, at the time that we met Gaia, was in her prime, and she was a nice enough lady. But she even admitted to us, she really never should have given that cute little girl that darling little lamb. The lamb became a sheep, the sheep became a flock. After there were a flock of sheep, they end up with goats, dogs, pigs, chickens. Some of these are words I don't even know what they mean. I saw them. There were also cows and horses, and we've seen the horses on the plains now that have come with the Hispaniola in the south and then broken free and have moved north with us. So they had horses. And all of a sudden the men didn't have to hunt anymore. And they had not been hunter-gatherers truly. They had in fact several plants they were cultivating, so they were living in villages, much the way we were, not always clan, but usually matrilineal villages, and they were doing quite well, much like we do, with the format that they had. Now, once the men didn't have to hunt anymore, there was not as much for them to do because everybody else was doing the things they had always done, and so the men became gangs, and the gang leaders became kings. They were they're the strongest, most powerful, and therefore the leaders of the gangs. And then the gangs became armies, much as we had seen in the later years with the Anglais and the Francais fighting, along with the Hispaniola. So once they started cultivating animals, much like they were cultivating food, grains, everything changed for them. And the worst of the change was in the men. All of a sudden, men found they could have excess. In a standard village situation, much like our villages, we have enough to do well. We may have a little extra. Extra time allows us to make beads like these. It gives us time to do other things. It allows us to have popcorn, which is not a great foodstuff, but a lot of fun. And so the maize we raised maize that could be popcorn. All this was working out very well for us, as with them, but we never decided to gather our deer or our turkey and put them in where we lived and covered them there. We always protected them in their natural grounds, which were our hunting grounds. And if there was a wolf that came in, or wolves that came in and threatened our deer or our turkey, our hunters who were out there spotting for the animals would run them off. If they killed one of the deer, our hunters would kill the wolf that killed the deer, and they would get to keep the skin and the teeth and the bones, but all the meat would go to the clan who had in fact claim on that deer. Because every deer that's available for food, the council of the village decides which deer goes to which clan as soon as the deer is born, and then they do everything to bring those through. If a bear, a lion, a wolf eats that deer or some of those deers, then those animals are treated as outlaws, and they're killed, and their meat is given to those people who had lost the meat because of what they killed. Those animals that were run away, that left without hurting anything, were in fact outsiders, and they did us no harm, so we would do them no harm. But now we have all these men in the other side of the eastern bitter water who have come to a point where they could actually hire people to be their warriors. They had enough that they accumulated from their wars that they could give things out to their warriors, and then ultimately they could give things out for craftsmen and artisans to not do the common labor of making the tools, making the growing the food, tending the animals. Those were the lowest classes now, and the warriors and the artisans and the royalty were all considered higher for some reason. than the people actually doing the effort to make things grow, to make things usable for food and for clothing and for all the elements we need to survive. These men got very used to that ability, and the first thing they decided they wanted to do is they wanted to pass their excess onto their youth, which is very confusing to us, and it took both Priebus and Gia a long time to help us understand. In a patrilineal society, what happens is the son of the man is considered his heir, collects everything that they have. In our clan society, there is no heir. Anybody that's in the clan has right to anything they need in the clan, and if more need it than the one, they'll make another one so that everybody that needs it has it. If one person dies, that makes no difference because we've been training the youth. The children who became the youth, who became the young adults, and then the adults are all trained to take part of anybody in the clan. So we always have people there that are capable of continuing everything going on. There is no need to accumulate, as there's no place to accumulate. We all slept in common longhouses or yurts or huts, and we're quite happy doing that. The stuff that you considered your own, a digging knife or a bag or some trinkets, a necklace, had to be stored where you slept. Nobody would take it, nobody would consider taking it because nobody needed it. If you wanted to, you could give it to anybody. And in fact, gifting was far more prevalent than trading or asking for something for somebody else. So their concept of father was something unique to us. In our clan society, with the matrilineal society, it was the brothers of the mothers and the uncles and the aunts and the grandmothers and the cherished uncles who took care of the youth, who took care of the children, who helped train all of them to become what they needed to be a beneficial part of the clan. The idea that a father was more than a donor was unique. In our clans, the way they decided who would be the father of a child, or what the Eastern people would think was a father of the child, was selected because the clan needed something that person had attributes for. So if you had somebody who was very good at making points, making beads, beads not so much, making anything, skinning the hides, making clothing, making, doing the hunting, all the making of the buildings. People that had special crafts were often considered as being appropriate, and the young women would have a child based on the person's probable ability to produce that which the clan needed. All of a sudden now, whatever qualities the father had, whether they were passed on to their son or not, was irrelevant. They were the son, therefore they deserved to have that position and to get all the things that have been accumulated by the father and accumulate even more. Obviously, a lot of men decided that they thought they should be the leader, especially as time went on and others more strong, more powerful, came to a position of saying, well, wait, I should be the king. I'm the most powerful. And the other kings would say, well, you might be the most powerful, but I've got an army here and they'll kill you. And they do, and there's no longer a problem. But there's always people within their army, people within their group that start thinking, well, maybe I should be the one that accumulates all this. And ultimately, the kings had to figure out a way. They first figured out a way to where they could make sure that their sons were their sons, which meant they took and eliminated Gaia from the concept of their lands. Women were no longer free. They were chattel. They were property of the men, because only if they were owned or totally controlled by the king could the king be sure that the children they produced were in fact his children. Otherwise, they could be having children by anybody around. So the women lost all their freedom. And considering that's a lot of women, that was a very serious thing, and one we were very concerned about. The other problem was the king said, well, the other said, why are you king and not I? And so the kings found out or figured out what they could do is they could say, well, look, there is a god like Gia, but a man like me, and he decided I should be the king. and anybody that disagreed with him, the army would fight and get rid of them. This led to a lot of interesting things because all of a sudden others said, well, I've got gods too. And pretty soon certain areas had many gods. And then all of a sudden the question became, which god has the right to choose which king? And a lot of more conflict occurred. As you can see, we're building a whole story of conflict constantly, from the gifting of the lamb to the little girl all the way through to our period now. So the men decided, okay, we need a single God, a great God, a God of gods. And that way, no matter who came in and said, well, what about this God here? This God wants me to be king. They say, yes, but our God is the God of gods. And that God of gods wants me to be king. I always went with power because ultimately somebody would be more powerful. The one who thought he was the God of God or the King of Kings because of the God of gods would find out that no, somebody else is more powerful, and they would no longer be, the original king would no longer be around, and there would be a new king, a new King of Kings put there by the God of gods. And obviously, if they got to the position, the God of gods was the one that put him there, because otherwise they couldn't have beat the other person if the other person was meant to be the King of Kings. Well, this didn't go very well. The first people that considered the single God were slaves themselves, and they fought for their freedom and finally got it, but then they searched for a long time before they found an area where they could actually defeat the people living there, and they took over that land as their land, and they said, we're worshiping a single God, a God of gods. Over time, they would preach the God of gods to others, and many of the other kings would see the value of it. But it wasn't until fairly recently that the position of king and God of gods found a secondary position, and that was the priest of the gods. Obviously, the king had to have somebody to communicate to the God of gods to, so the priests became involved, and these are the black shirts that we know today. These people found power in just being the priests, and now we had the King of Kings and the God of gods and the priest of priests working everything out, who could be king of where and who could be priest of priests and who could be God, who was God of gods. And they continued to grow in that manner. Now with this single God, this one God above all. Unfortunately, they were still battling with people that were worshiping Gaia. That's why Gaia was still around. And these people were having a hard time accepting this concept of a God when they had always decided that everything they got that they needed was given to them by somebody, and Gaia was the one that they accepted as being the responsible party for that. And so they would give thanks to Gaia. But now they're being told to give thanks to this God whose only thing that they can see is making sure the King of Kings is the King of Kings. And so the people who were the priests of priests decided that they needed to come up with a way to entice these people who were still worshiping Gaia and other gods, whether the gods were the trees or the plants or the fish or whatever they considered responsible for their benevolence and their good life. And they said, okay, there is a God of gods, but that God is actually not just a God. That God is the Father, which everybody in their land understood, the Son, and then they said the Holy Spirit. Well, the Holy Spirit was that entity that was like us on a vision quest. They were there, but they weren't there. You couldn't see them, but they were around. And by having the three gods, that helped some, but that didn't help the Gaia believers. So the Gaia believers, they said, then there's the Virgin Mother of the Son. And it was the Holy Ghost that made the Virgin a mother, not God, but actually the Holy Ghost, which was an even more interesting quandary that we haven't figured out yet. But ultimately, they now had a woman, Virgin Mary, to take the place of Gaia, and then they had all the tradespeople and the travelers and the army people, the military, and they were saying, well, how can we speak to the God of gods when God of gods only speaks to the priest of priests? And so they were told, well, you can have this thing they called a saint, a special person who, when they died, had shown themselves to be so special that they were given special powers. And now you can go to them and ask for what you need, and they can take that to the God of gods, as Mary could do for the women, taking their needs to the God of gods. And now you had the God of gods as a singular multiplier that was acceptable to all and understood by actually none, at least none that we could find. So that became the idea of the God of gods, which is where we were when we decided it was about time for us to come home. We said our goodbyes to Priebus and to Gaia, and we returned back to our lands in the northern skies and met with our ancient bear clan, who had taken good care of us while we were gone, and told what we had found. And once again, we all went into a council meeting. I was again the white sashim, Winnie was the red sashim, and they discussed. Well, now we had some idea of the God of gods. We have a little bit better idea of who the black shirts were, and we'd gotten a better understanding of the background of the outsiders and why they were different, why the Hispaniola, the Anglais, and les Français were so different from each other. And we ultimately got together and decided what recommendations we could give to the Haudenosaunee Great Council, and that is why I have returned now some 6 winter counts since, and have given this information to the Haudenosaunee Council, which I'm now sharing with all the peoples. Winnie is in the east, sharing it with her people. Nape is in the west, sharing it with his people. All the ancient Bear clan members have gone back to their people and are walking through the villages and going from place to place so that all understand how we can all survive this new problem that has vested itself in this area. The first question, actually let's start in the opposite order. It's better. The third question was, are these people outsiders or outlaws? If they're outlaws, we need to do war. The ancient bears decided that we have already been depleted as a people by Wendigo and all the deaths that have been going on for many generations that have eliminated so many of our villages and decimated our clans and created such a problem for our people that we've lost much of the information, more than even we, the ancient bears, can bring back. So the idea of going to war against these people who were warriors and had people doing nothing but warring was threatening, was frightening. It was something we didn't want to do. So we decided that even though war seems appropriate because they're acting more like outlaws than outsiders, it would be too devastating to our people. And so our recommendation is not to war against them. The second question was, were the black shirts Wendigo? And the answer is they act like it, but there's nothing that we could find out from Gaia or Priebus, nothing that we could find out from our travels to the past all the way up to the present that would indicate these priests and priests of priests would in fact have any power other than the power of suggestion. And I don't think, the ancient bears don't think that their power of suggestion is sufficient to actually kill people. So we don't think they are Wendigo. And that's an issue that all we can say is they're not. The problems are going to come from elsewhere. Which brings us back to the first question. What do we do about the God of gods? Well, the first thing we can do is help people better understand the differences between the Eastern peoples patriarchal. And the big difference that happened with the kings became not just the patrilineal leader of their people, where the father hands down the leadership to the son, but they were actually the patriarchal leader of their people. The kings rule everyone else. All things belong to the king, and that's why the kings are constantly trying to grow bigger, because they've accumulated more than they could possibly use. All they can do is accumulate more, especially with the hope that they'll have enough to pay a bigger army more to beat the other guy that wants to be the king of kings. So they're always trying, as a patriarchal society, to totally control everyone, women, children, those who put the effort into all the things that are made. They have no respect for anything other than accumulating more. So with that in mind, the question is, what is a god? And the ancient bears came to the conclusion that the god is that which we ask for help when things are not going well. We ask for rain when we need rain. We ask for sunlight when we need sunlight. We ask for the growth of the plants. We ask for the fruit from the trees and the nuts from the trees. We ask for the necessary elements for us to survive, enough wood to make our homes, enough land to make our fields. These are what we ask. And who are we asking? We're asking the spirits, the spirit of the land. We can call it Gaia, or we can just call it Mother Earth. It doesn't matter. We're asking that which we cannot see, and therefore hoping for the best. Now, when the best comes, we then thank these spirits for that gift. And right now we all say prayers to the sun for rising and bringing us heat, the moon for providing light during the nighttime, Mother Earth for providing the plants and growth, and the animals and the food. So we're already thanking that. The ancient bears decided that the Haudenosaunee Great Law is read at the beginning of each Haudenosaunee Council. And they read each of the laws in order based on repeating this on a regular basis, more than annually. We think perhaps the seventh law of the Haudenosaunee Great Law could be used to give thanks to a great creator who is the source of all things useful to man and a ruler of our health and our life. Now, by adding this great creator, and we thought about great spirit, but the problem is the great spirit sounds too much like the second level Holy Spirit, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. So we decided it would be better to use a different term for the God of gods, and so we recommend calling them the great creator. And by putting this in the seventh law and reading it at all the council meetings, soon the people would begin to consider the great creator as another one of those who we give thanks to when we have what we need. And it doesn't hurt anyone to consider that. It may in fact help, because if in fact in some way the black shirts are connected with Wendigo, then they may in fact stop killing our people. So that may be beneficial in that regard. We also thought about it for a while and decided that the Haudenosaunee might also want to include the great creator in reciting their 73rd law, and acknowledge the great creator who has made us all of one blood, joining both our minds and theirs, that we are all people and all related. Much as we have as a clan the ability to go anywhere in these western lands that are clan village lands and find cousins, because we are all clan members. In my case, I have a cousin to the bear clan of the old Onondaga. I could go anywhere and find bear clan members, and they would accept me as a cousin, and because of that, I would have a place to stay. I would provide effort to what they needed, they would provide effort to what I needed, and I would actually be family in that area. By having them recognize that we also accept the great creator, perhaps they will see us as a similar same blood as we do in the clans. So what do we do? If the people and you all take to your people just as the Haudenosaunee Council will take to their people, this idea of a great creator as being something that in fact helps us live a good and healthy life, I think that might go a long way. The ancient bears think that might go a long way to helping us maintain an outsider relationship rather than an outlaw relationship with these les Français, Anglais, and Espanol. We realize it's a stretch with the Hispaniola who are already conquering everything they can, but at least for those of us in the north, we might have a chance to find an area that we can all come to agreements on. To do so, we need to cling to our values, to the value of the self, the individual, the rights of the one person to make any decision despite what the council said. If the council decides to go to war, no person is forced to go to war with the Red Chief or the Red Sachem. The person can stay and say, I don't agree with this war, and that's perfectly all right. That's the council's responsibility to find enough people to be able to successfully handle that battle if it's going to be one. The clan and the importance of the clan. This is our family. This are the people that take care of each other. These are the people that over the generations can pass on what they need and what they know to the next generation, and the clans can continue forever. And the village, which is always a grouping of multiple clans, anywhere from 4 or 5 to 7 to 9 clans, can live together in a village, and they each take care first of the clan, but then any in the village that are having problems, the other clans will come to their aid. So nobody has to worry about being alone and unable to care for themselves, because our clan village system makes sure everybody is cared for by everybody else. We don't need kings. We don't need priests. We have everything that we need, and we are the people. Let us bring the Eastern people into us. Well, let us teach them our ways. Let us show them the benefits of living the way we do, which is to have enough, but not to accumulate. Because until everybody has enough, there is nothing to accumulate. Because if one person takes something needed by another, that is not the clan village way. We need to teach these people coming in our way of helping each other throughout. We need to teach them the rights and responsibilities of the individuals, the clans, and the villages. Every clan, every individual has their certain rights. We all have the right to life. We all have the right to work, to do something that helps us survive. The clan has the same rights. The village has the same rights related to other villages. And so by maintaining this understanding of rights and responsibilities, we can create a situation where there is a mediation way, a way of coming to a universal agreement that allows everybody to come away with what they need, and with those who deserve more, perhaps getting a little bit more. It doesn't hurt to have some accumulation of excess, as long as the excess is recognition of effort, and as long as nobody is going without. And that's important too. It's important to recognize that we need to learn to judge people on the way they act, and based on the way they act to decide whether they are ourselves, they are outsiders, they are outlaws. We need to maintain this recognition. Now, right now, we have people that are very vague on the difference between an outlaw and an outsider. But only if we teach them can they learn to understand what we're trying to achieve. We need to teach these outsiders that we respect everything. The plants, the animals. We know we have to consume to survive. We have to eat the food, whether it's a plant, a fruit, a nut, or an animal. We give thanks to those plants, the fruit, the nuts, and the animals for being there for us so that we can consume them and continue. And we don't consider that as being something wrong, because we are not taking something from them, we are giving something to them, because by consuming them, they are becoming part of us. and we are sharing part of them. And that is good for all things. Now, never seek to accumulate. If your clan is really efficient and they can finish their work, they can make beads. And making beads shows that you have excellent effort. If your clan needs to spend all its time just surviving, there's no time for beads. But if you have people with a lot of beads, that's not excess. The beads are an indication of effort, not something of wealth or accumulation. It's a sign that says we work well together. And in truth, although we're all individuals, no individual can survive by themselves. Unless we learn to work together, we will never achieve more than bare survival. As long as we can hold on to our values, as long as we can hold on to our clans, as long as we can change that what must be changed, but still cling to that which we all know is appropriate, we have no need to fear the future. So stay with what is important, trust your fellow man, and help those who need learn what we know to have good lives. Wato, thank you for being here. And thank you, signers, for doing the signing. And thank you, Bear Clan, for hosting us at this place today.